She knelt in the dirt, a gun pressed against her head, by men sworn to protect her. They laughed, blind to who she really was. A Green Beret trained to tear systems apart. By sunrise, their faces would be on every screen in America. But in that moment, on that dark Georgia road, they thought they'd won. Before we continue this powerful story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another powerful story you won't want to miss. The engine rumbled beneath her hands, steady but tired, as Maya Jennings guided her father's old Ford pickup through the familiar streets of Roosevelt County, Georgia. The late afternoon sun stretched shadows across cracked sidewalls and boarded windows. What used to be bustling storefronts were now faded shells of a forgotten past. Where Mrs. Lattimore's ice cream parlor once brought joy to kids on summer afternoons, there now stood a vape shop blinking in neon silence. The playground by the Baptist church, once full of laughter, sat deserted, its swings swaying gently in the humid breeze, like ghosts of better days. Maya felt the weight of every memory pressing against her chest. This was her hometown, the place where she'd run track, where her father taught her to change spark plugs, where her mother baked cornbread for every family in the neighborhood. But now, the warmth of those memories felt distant, overshadowed by years of war, loss, and quiet battles against a world that never stopped. She adjusted the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of her reflection. 16 years in Special Forces had sharpened her edges. Dark, steady eyes that had seen combat zones more predictable than the streets of her own childhood. Her natural hair, pulled back in a tight bun, framed a face marked by quiet determination and exhaustion that never quite left. She wasn't just coming home to heal, she was coming home to protect what was left. As she slowed at a red light near Central High, the school's brick walls seemed frozen in time. She had broken state records there, sprinting down those tracks with a heart full of hope. Now, all she could feel was the uneasy stillness in the air. The same streets where neighbors used to wave, now watched from behind curtains. The silence was louder than any battlefield she'd known. She made the final turn onto Roosevelt Street, where her family home still stood, weathered but proud. The two-story house with its peeling white paint and sagging porch swing was more than wood and nails. It was the last piece of her father still standing. She parked the truck, turned off the engine, and let the hum fade into the thick summer air. Before she could reach for the door, a familiar voice called from the porch. "My girl." Her mother, Maya Jennings, stood in the doorway, wiping her hands on a faded dish towel, a smile breaking through the tired lines of her face. At 65, Diane still carried herself with the quiet authority of a lifelong school teacher. Warm eyes, steady voice, and a heart bigger than this town deserved. Maya stepped out of the truck, boots crunching on gravel, and walked up the worn steps into her mother's waiting arms. The embrace was strong, familiar. Diane smelled of vanilla and lavender fabric softener, the scent of home, of peace Maya hadn't known in years. For a moment she allowed herself to soften. "You're too thin," Diane said, pulling back to study her daughter's face. "Have you been eating?" "Trying," Maya answered, managing a small smile. "Old habits, meal preps and protein bars." Diane shook her head but smiled. "Well, tonight we're fixing that." And just like that, Maya was home again. Almost. The inside of the house was almost exactly as she remembered. Family portraits lined the hallway, chronicling decades of life. Maya's graduation from West Point, her father in his postal uniform, holiday gatherings around the worn oak table. But there was one new addition that stopped her in her tracks. The folded American flag from her father's funeral, sitting in a shadow box on the mantel. The sight of it squeezed her chest tight. Dinner was already simmering on the stove. The kitchen, warm with the scent of chicken and dumplings, wrapped her in a kind of safety she hadn't felt since before her first deployment. Diane moved with practiced grace, setting the table, pulling cornbread from the oven, humming an old gospel tune that filled the quiet spaces like a comforting balm. They ate together, falling into a familiar rhythm. Conversations about Aunt Clara's knee surgery, Cousin Jamal's new baby, the church bake sale next weekend. Safe topics. Topics that didn't ask Maya about the things she'd seen overseas. The firefights, the friends she'd lost, the bureaucracy she battled in her civilian job helping veterans fight for the benefits they were promised, but so often denied. But the silence weighed between them. Diane saw it in her daughter's eyes. Maya might have been home, but her mind was still in another place entirely. "Has work been?" Diane finally asked, her voice gentle. Maya hesitated, pushing a piece of chicken around her plate. "It's hard, Mama. Harder than the war zone sometimes. The system breaks people before they even have a chance to heal. Soldiers file claims for PTSD and end up waiting years. Some don't make it." Diane reached across the table and squeezed Maya's hand. "You can't carry it all, baby. You never could." Maya gave a faint smile. "I try anyway." The clock on the kitchen wall ticked softly. Outside, cicadas hummed in the distance, filling the night with their steady chorus. Maya leaned back, letting the sounds of home fill the room. But she couldn't shake the weight in her chest. She'd left the battlefield, but the fight had followed her. Diane stood, wiping her hands. "Before I forget, I need to grab my prescription from the pharmacy. I ran out this morning." Maya glanced at the clock. It was nearly 9:30. "I'll go," she offered, standing. "You've had a long day. Besides, I know the way." "You just got here," Diane protested, but there was relief in her voice. Maya grabbed her keys. "It's fine, Mama. You go rest. I'll be back before you know it." And with that, she slipped back out into the night, unaware that the road ahead would change everything. The evening air wrapped around her as she stepped back onto the porch. Magnolia trees swayed gently in the night breeze, their sweet scent mingling with the thick Georgia humidity. The old wind chime hanging from the corner of the porch sang softly, the same one she'd sent her mother during her second tour in Germany. Memories clung to this house like ivy on brick. Sliding into the driver's seat, she adjusted the mirror again out of habit, scanning her surroundings before she started the engine. Even after all these years, she couldn't shake the instincts drilled into her by war. Always assess your exits. Always watch your six. The truck roared to life, its deep growl cutting through the quiet street. She backed out slowly, headlights sweeping across the worn picket fences and cracked sidewalks of her childhood. For a fleeting moment, it felt like she was just another neighbor running a late-night errand, just another daughter picking up a prescription for her mother. But peace never lasted long. As she made her way down Madison Avenue, the familiar pharmacy sign glowed in the distance. She pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, parking near the entrance for better visibility. Old habits. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly as she approached the counter. The pharmacist, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, greeted her politely but with a hint of wariness. Small towns remember faces, but military service has a way of making you feel like an outsider, no matter where you go. "Prescription for Maya Jennings," she said, sliding her mother's insurance card across the counter. He nodded, retrieving the small white bag. "Here you go. Tell your mama we miss seeing her at the bake sales." "I will," Maya smiled faintly, tucking the bag into her jacket pocket. She turned to leave, but something made her pause. The reflection in the glass door caught her eye. A pair of squad cars idling in the shadows of the adjacent lot, their outlines barely visible under the dim parking lot lights. Her stomach tightened. Years of tactical experience screamed at her that this wasn't a coincidence. She calmly pushed through the door, walking to her truck without breaking stride. She placed the prescription on the passenger seat, hands steady but alert. She started the engine and pulled out of the lot, taking the side road home instead of the main street. But it was too late. Red and blue lights exploded behind her, cutting through the night like sirens of war. Maya Jennings took a deep breath, steadying herself. The battlefield had found her again, and this time, it wore a badge. The night stretched ahead of her, dark and still, broken only by the occasional porch light and the distant hum of cicadas. Maya kept her grip loose on the wheel, her posture relaxed, but her senses sharp. Years of tactical driving taught her to trust quiet roads the least. Quiet meant cover for threats. Quiet meant something was waiting. She adjusted the rearview mirror and caught the faint outline of headlights far behind her. 2 cars, maybe more, following at a distance that was too perfect to be coincidence. She scanned the dashboard. All her lights were working. Speed limit steady. Seatbelt fastened. No reason for a stop. But deep down, she knew this wasn't about a violation. This was about her. She took a turn onto Pine Ridge Road, a less traveled route home. The squad cars followed. No sirens, no flashing lights yet. Just silent hunters in the night. Her pulse stayed steady, counting heartbeats like a metronome. If they wanted to play this game, she would let them show their hand first. Maya tapped the dashboard camera, making sure it was recording. Audio and video synced to her secure cloud server. Another turn, this time onto the old industrial bypass. Trees lined both sides of the road, casting long shadows over the cracked pavement. No streetlights, no houses nearby. Exactly the kind of road an ambush waits for. She sighed quietly, the weight of inevitability pressing on her chest. This wasn't just harassment. This was something more calculated. Then it happened. Red and blue lights burst in her mirrors, sudden and blinding. A sharp whoop of the siren split the night air, followed by the crackle of a loudspeaker. "Pull over now. Driver, pull over immediately." Maya took a slow breath, signaling and pulling her truck onto the gravel shoulder. She parked at an angle, ensuring her dashcam had a full view of the approaching officers. Hands resting at 10 and 2 on the wheel, she kept her breathing even, just like she taught other veterans in her de-escalation workshops. The night was too quiet now. No passing cars, no witnesses. Just her and whoever stepped out of those cruisers. 2 doors slammed in unison. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Maya watched them approach in her side mirror. Deputy Shane Toiver on the driver's side, flashlight beam cutting across her face. Deputy Kyle McRae circled to the passenger side, his hand already hovering near his holstered weapon. No greetings, no explanation, just hostility. Toiver's voice cut through the dark, low and cold. "License and registration." Maya kept her voice calm and clear. "Officer, may I ask the reason for the stop?" Toiver smirked, the flashlight lingering on her military haircut, on the calm defiance in her eyes. "Broken tail light," he said flatly, though they both knew it was a lie. And with that, the night changed forever. Maya moved deliberately, her motions smooth and precise. "I'm reaching for my wallet and registration now," she said, voice steady but firm. Slowly, she pulled her wallet from the center console and handed over her ID and vehicle papers. Toiver snatched them without a word. His flashlight danced across her license, pausing when he reached the military designation. His lip curled in a sneer. "Well, what do we have here? Special Forces, huh?" His voice dripped with sarcasm, loud enough for McRae to hear. "Look at that, McRae, we got ourselves one of them affirmative action soldiers." McRae chuckled from the passenger side, tapping the butt of his flashlight against the window. "Bet she thinks she's some kind of hero." Maya kept her jaw tight, suppressing the instinct to correct them, to remind them of the countless hours of sacrifice behind that title. Instead, she focused on survival. "Sir," she said evenly, "all of my vehicle's lights were operational when I left home. May I request that you verify the tail light before we proceed further?" But Toiver wasn't interested in facts. He leaned closer to the window, breath fogging the glass, his grin razor sharp. "Oh, she's got herself some attitude. Listen to that, McRae. She thinks she can tell us how to do our job." McRae's laughter grated against the night air. "They always think they're better than us, till they're not." Toiver stepped back, resting his hand on his holster. "Step out of the vehicle, now." Maya kept her voice level. "Respectfully, officer, I have the right to know why I'm being ordered out of my vehicle during a traffic stop for a minor equipment violation." "Did I stutter?" Toivo barked. "Step out, now." He yanked the door open before she could reply. Maya's heart hammered in her chest, but her movements remained controlled. She slowly swung her legs out, keeping her hands visible. No sudden movements, no escalation. "Hands where I can see them," Toiver ordered, drawing his weapon. The cold glint of the barrel caught the moonlight. Maya complied, raising her hands shoulder high. McCrae circled around, his gun also drawn. "On your knees," he ordered, voice sharp and cruel. "It's not a lawful command," Maya said firmly. "I have complied fully. There is no cause for—" The muzzle of Toiver's gun pressed against her temple, cutting her words short. "I said, on your knees," Toiver hissed, the smile gone from his voice, replaced by something darker. "Or I put you in the dirt, permanently." She froze, every instinct screaming to disarm him, to end this now. But she wasn't in a war zone anymore. She was in a town where the law would cover their tracks and blame her for her own death. Slowly, with gravel biting through her jeans, Maya dropped to her knees. The night air pressed heavy against her skin as she knelt there on the cold gravel. Every nerve screamed, but she forced her muscles to relax. This wasn't combat. This was survival. And right now, survival meant documenting everything. Toiver stood over her like a predator, savoring the moment. He nudged her shoulder with the barrel of his gun. "That's more like it," he sneered. "A little respect for the law goes a long way." McCrae pulled out his phone, angling it to capture her humiliation. "Smile for the camera, soldier girl. Let's show the boys down at the station how tough you really are." Maya clenched her jaw, her eyes fixed straight ahead, cataloging every detail. She noted Toiver's badge number, the tremor in McCrae's trigger finger, the faint rustle of the chain-linked fence across the street. Every second was burned into her memory. Intelligence gathering under duress, muscle memory from war zones. Toiver leaned down, his breath hot against her ear. "You think your fancy uniform makes you somebody. Out here, you're just another body in the dirt." She felt the cold press of the pistol against her temple again, sharper this time. A chill ran down her spine, not from fear, but from the precise calculation of her options. 2 moves, and she could disarm him. 3, and McCrae would be down. But that would make her the aggressor. That would give them the justification they wanted. So she stayed still. McCrae circled her, recording every angle like a trophy hunter. "This one's going viral, man," he laughed. "Can't wait to post it in the group chat." A car passed on the distant road, headlights briefly illuminating the scene. In that flash, Maya caught movement behind the fence. A shadow, crouched low, holding something up. A phone. Someone was watching. Someone was filming. For the first time since the stop began, Maya allowed herself a flicker of hope. Toiver finally holstered his weapon, stepping back. "Get up," he ordered, voice sharp. "And get that taillight fixed before I stop you again." Her knees burned as she stood slowly, dignity intact, despite the gravel embedded in her skin. She walked back to her truck, without looking at them, every step measured and precise. "Have a blessed night now," Toiver called after her, his laughter cold and hollow. Maya sat in the driver's seat, hands trembling as she gripped the wheel. She watched in the rearview mirror as Toiver and McCrae shared one last laugh, showing each other the photos on their phones. But what they didn't know was that somewhere in the darkness, another camera had captured the truth. And the night was far from over. Jalen Harris crouched low behind a rusted chain-length chain, his breath shallow, his hands trembling. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was just walking home from his cousin's place when he saw the flashing lights, the shouting voices, and something told him not to walk away. Through the cracked glass of his phone, he framed the scene unfolding across the street, and what he saw made his stomach twist. A black woman, face calm but exhausted, knelt in the gravel like she was some criminal. A deputy pressed a gun to her temple. Another one circled her like a predator. They weren't protecting anyone. They were enjoying this, laughing at her pain, turning her life into a sick joke. Jalen knew her face. Everyone in Roosevelt County did. That was Maya Jennings. Diane Jennings' daughter, the hometown girl who'd made it out, special forces, war hero. He'd never met her, but his dad always said she ran faster than the wind when she was in high school. Said she carried her whole neighborhood's pride when she wore that army uniform. And now here she was, forced to kneel in the dirt by the very people who should have been welcoming her home. He hit record. His thumb trembled, but he steadied it. Focused. Captured it all. The harsh words, the sneering faces, the cold steel against her head. He didn't know what he would do with the video. He only knew someone needed to see this. Someone needed to know the truth. When the deputies finally walked away, leaving her in the dirt, Jalin stayed frozen, heart pounding like a drum. Only when Maya stood, silent and dignified, and drove off without a word, did Jalin allow himself to move. The squad cars faded into the night like nothing had happened. But something had happened, and he had it all on video. Back in his bedroom, door locked, curtains drawn, he stared at the phone screen, the weight of what he held crushing him. If he posted this under his real name, they'd find him. Everyone knew what happened to kids who spoke up in this town. But if he didn't post it, no one would believe her. No one ever did. He created a new TikTok account. No real name, no face, anonymous. He uploaded the video, hands shaking. He typed the caption slow and steady. Green Beret humiliated at gunpoint in rural Georgia. No charges, just racism. For a long minute, he hovered over the post button. His heart told him to run. His gut told him to fight. And finally, he pressed upload. The video didn't just spread, it ignited. First a few views, then hundreds, then thousands in minutes. Before sunrise, it was everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Even the morning Facebook crowd picked it up. People from all over the country, maybe the world, watched Maya Jennings kneel in the dirt while two deputies laughed with a gun to her head. The captions were blunt, the outrage immediate. Green Beret, humiliated in her own hometown. Protect and serve? This is protect and terrorize. She fought for this country, and this is how they thank her? Veterans started weighing in. People in uniform, people who knew what sacrifice looked like, called it what it was, a betrayal. Civil rights leaders reposted the clip, adding their voices to the growing storm. Hashtags exploded. Justice for Maya, Veterans Against Violence, End Police Terror. The comments came faster than anyone could read them. This isn't just small-town Georgia. This is America. Where's the Sheriff's Department statement? Name these officers now. By 7:00 a.m., it was trending nationally. By 8:00 a.m., national media outlets were scrambling to catch up. Maya Jennings wasn't a story. They realized she was a movement. Across town, Jalin sat on the edge of his bed, the screen lighting up his face in the early morning gloom. Notifications poured in so fast his phone froze twice. He scrolled through the comments with a mix of dread and awe. Had he just started a war or a revolution? His sister Andrea burst into the room, out of breath, phone in hand. "Jay, it's everywhere," she said, nearly shouting. CNN just ran a segment. NBS was calling it a civil rights flashpoint, even BuzzFeed's on it. Jalin swallowed hard. What if they find me? His voice cracked. The fear he'd buried all night crept back in. Andrea sat beside him, gripping his shoulder. "You used a burner. No name. No location data. You're safe, for now. But that doesn't mean they won't try to spin it." And spin it they did. The local sheriff's office issued a bland, calculated statement within the hour. The woman involved was a subject of concern, possibly experiencing mental health issues. Our deputies acted out of an abundance of caution for their safety and hers. But the video didn't lie. There was no aggression, no erratic behavior, just a calm, dignified veteran forced to kneel in the gravel while two white deputies marked her sacrifice. The story was out now. No press release could undo what the world had seen. And somewhere in town, Maya Jennings was waking up to a world that had just changed overnight. Maya woke to the sharp buzz of her phone vibrating non-stop on the nightstand. She blinked against the early light filtering through the curtains, her body still aching from the night before. She hadn't expected to sleep at all. 47 missed calls, dozens of unread texts, notifications piling faster than she could clear them. The first text she opened froze her blood cold, a screenshot. Her image, kneeling in the gravel, gun to her temple. The caption burned across the screen, "Green Beret forced to kneel by Georgia deputies." Her fingers hovered over the screen, pulse thudding in her ears. Her entire body remembered the feel of the gravel biting into her knees, the cold steel pressed against her temple. Now the whole world had seen it. She scrolled through the messages. Old army buddies checking in, journalists looking for statements, veterans groups rallying support, friends offering prayers, strangers offering outrage. But nothing could prepare her for what she felt when she opened the video itself. She stared at her own face on the screen, captured by someone else's lens. Calm, composed, humiliated. The deputy's laughter cut through the quiet of her bedroom like a knife. She pressed pause, but the sound stayed in her head. The small town reacted faster than she expected. By the time she stepped into the local grocery store, whispers followed her down every aisle. People looked up from their phones, then quickly looked away. Some offered sympathetic glances. Others just stared like she was some strange headline walking down aisle 3. The cashier, barely 16, kept his eyes on the register as he rang her up. His voice cracked as he said, "Have a good day, ma'am." He couldn't meet her gaze. She left the store quickly, groceries in hand, and sat in the driver's seat of her truck, letting the weight of the world settle on her shoulders. The town she grew up in had turned into a battlefield overnight, and the first shot wasn't fired by her, it was fired by the truth. Her phone rang again. This time, she answered. "Maya." The voice was low, steady, familiar. "It's Doc." She closed her eyes for a beat. "I figured you'd call." "I saw the video," he said, no pretense in his voice. "It's bad, real bad, and the department's already spinning it. They're feeding local media a story that you're unstable, PTSD, mentally unfit, dangerous." She let out a bitter laugh, right on cue. "You need to brace for what's next," Doc warned. "They're going to try to bury you, Maya. Smear campaigns, legal threats, surveillance. This isn't just some backwoods harassment. This is systemic. This is war." Maya stared out at the parking lot, at the people who avoided her eyes but couldn't stop watching. Her voice dropped into something quiet, steady, unbreakable. "Then we fight." Doc paused, then spoke with the weight of every war they'd survived together. "Yeah, but we fight smart. Not just for you, for everybody they think they can silence." Maya glanced at her phone again. The view count ticked higher every second. "No one's silencing me again," she whispered. The night that broke her silence had only just begun. By mid-morning, Sheriff Kenneth Danvers stood behind a polished oak podium at the county courthouse. Cameras lined the room, flashing like lightning in a storm. Reporters scribbled notes, but no one interrupted. Danvers's face wore the carefully rehearsed look of concern, a man he wanted the world to believe. Just doing his job. The backdrop bore the sheriff's department seal, a symbol that now felt like a warning. He cleared his throat and spoke with the slow, measured drawl of a man used to his words being taken as gospel. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to begin by saying that our department takes every allegation seriously. But it's important to remember that situations involving individuals with complex histories require careful context." He paused, letting the tension settle. "The woman involved in this regrettable incident is Maya Jennings, a former member of the U.S. military. While we respect her service, we must acknowledge that Ms. Jennings has a documented history of combat trauma. Her military record, reviewed by our department, indicates multiple deployments, classified missions, and episodes of post-traumatic stress. Our deputies acted according to protocol, when faced with what they believed to be a volatile individual. The cameras clicked. The statement hit like a hammer. "It has a decorated background, yes," Danvers continued, voice tight. "But such a background comes with certain risks, situational instability, aggressive tendencies. Our officers did what they thought necessary to protect the public and themselves from potential harm." No mention of the video, no acknowledgement of the kneeling, the gun pressed to her head, the laughter. Just a narrative, a dangerous veteran, broken, threatening, in need of restraint. Danvers wrapped up the conference with the final blow. "We regret any distress caused. Our priority is and always will be public safety. We urge the community to refrain from judgment until the investigation concludes." And with that, he left the stage, flanked by deputies who didn't answer a single question. Within the hour, every local news station had broadcast the sheriff's words. The headlines wrote themselves. "Troubled veteran involved in late-night police encounter. Sheriff warns of military trauma risks. Community urged to withhold judgment." On talk radio, callers debated her sanity. Online forums filled with ugly questions. Was she unstable? Was she reaching for a weapon we didn't see? Should we trust veterans with combat PTSD driving in our neighborhoods? The smear machine worked fast and precise. But it wasn't just the public they were influencing. It was the courts, the voters, the system that protected them. Maya watched it all unfold on her mother's living room TV, her jaw clenched tight. They were rewriting her story while she was still living it. But they forgot one thing. She'd spent her entire career outsmarting men like them on foreign battlefields. She could do it again, right here at home. The first time Maya noticed the unmarked car, it was parked 3 houses down, engine off, windows tinted too dark for county regulations. A beige sedan, plain, forgettable, except for the fact that it had been idling there since sunrise. She clocked it immediately. Situational awareness never left you, not even after you left the battlefield, especially not in a town like this. By noon, there were 2 more. A black SUV parked outside the church parking lot across the street. A dusty pickup, worn but positioned perfectly to see her front door. They didn't make contact, not yet. They just watched, silent, patient, waiting for her to make the wrong move so they could justify what came next. Inside her home, Maya swept the house for bugs. It wasn't paranoia, it was training. She found the first tracker under the wheel well of her father's old Ford truck. A slim GPS unit, the kind local law enforcement could order without a warrant. The second device was tucked beneath her porch light, angled toward the driveway. Small, wireless, motion-activated. Someone wanted to know exactly when she came and when. She dismantled them both, hands steady, heart quiet. This was a message, a reminder that they still thought they had the upper hand. She slipped inside and pulled the shades, her mind already calculating next steps. She couldn't trust her phone, couldn't trust her laptop. Everything was compromised now. Every text, every email, every innocent web search. Her instincts told her to disappear, but not yet. First, she needed answers. The surveillance didn't end at her property line. Every time she went into town, faces turned. Some friendly, some cautious, some quietly recording. It wasn't just the cops watching her anymore. It was neighbors, strangers, some out of fear, others out of curiosity. Maybe some waiting to see if she'd break. In the grocery store parking lot, she caught another unmarked car following her, pulling out 2 cars behind her on the drive home. She lost them easily, with a few tactical turns, down a dead-end street, through the back entrance of the old textile mill, then back out through a side alley. Textbook evasive driving, but she knew they'd be back. Surveillance wasn't about being invisible, it was about reminding you that you were never alone. Back at the house, her mother watched her from the kitchen window, concern etched deep in her face. "You're being hunted again, aren't you?" Diane asked quietly. Maya nodded once, swallowing the lump in her throat. "They're hunting the wrong person, Mama," she said, voice like steel. "They think I'll fold. They think I'll run." Her mother stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Then show them who raised you." Maya smiled faintly, the ghost of a soldier's grin. "Already working on it." That night, Maya pulled the encrypted dashcam drive from beneath her truck's dashboard. She'd installed the system herself years ago, a habit from combat convoys overseas. It recorded constantly front and rear cameras, night vision, audio feeds. She brought the drive inside and plugged it into an old offline laptop she kept for sensitive work. The screen flickered to life, and Maya Scrovely. The stop was there, the red and blue lights flooding her mirrors, the sharp orders, the sound of Toiver's voice, arrogant and cruel. But just before the deputies reached her door, the footage glitched, an abrupt static burst, and went black. A signal jammer, military grade, the kind local law enforcement wasn't supposed to have. But there was something they missed, a 5-second audio clip before the feed cut out. Two voices, one she recognized as Toiver's, the other muffled but clear enough. "Gather her Green Beret, quickie clean but make her remember." Uppy that. Standard humiliation protocol. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't a random stop. They had been waiting for her. She called Doc. The line crackled with static as his voice came through low and urgent. "Maya, just finished digging through some county servers. You're not going to like what I found." "Hit me," she said. "Your military file was accessed yesterday, illegally, by someone inside the sheriff's department. They flagged your vehicle the minute you crossed county lines." Maya closed her eyes, rage simmering just beneath the surface. "But they knew exactly who I was before they pulled me over." "Exactly," Doc confirmed. "This wasn't about a tail light. It was a hit job." She took a breath, steadying herself. "What else did you find?" Doc's voice dropped lower, grave. "I pulled arrest records from the past 2 years. You're not the first, Maya. Dozens of black veterans, every single one flagged in advance, stopped on minor charges, and funneled straight into the county jail. The pattern's too perfect to be a coincidence." "Veterans?" she asked, though part of her already knew. "Because they're profitable," Doc said bitterly. "County jails got a private contract with Colonial Creek Correctional Facility. Every inmate they transfer earns them a kickback. But veterans? They're worth double. Combat pay, disability benefits, federal subsidies for high-risk inmates. To them, you're not a hero. You're revenue." Maya's pulse pounded in her ears. "Regulations are broken. Look at a new Exactly," Doc said, "and with the mental health angle, they can justify high-risk classifications. More money per head." She stared at the flickering dashcam footage, the pieces clicking into place. "They thought I was just another number on their ledger." Doc hesitated, then spoke softly. "They didn't realize you're the one who keeps score." Maya leaned back in her chair, her resolve hardening. "Then it's time we rewrite their books." And for the first time in days, she allowed herself to smile, cold, sharp, and ready. Jalen Harris didn't come home after school. At first, his sister Andrea thought maybe he'd stopped by a friend's house. Maybe he'd gone to the corner store for snacks like he always did. But when the streetlights flickered on and his bed stayed empty, the worry wrapped itself tight around her chest. She called his phone, straight to voicemail. She texted. No response. By 9 o'clock, the panic was too loud to ignore. Andrea ran to her mother's room, her voice shaking as she said the words no mother ever wants to hear. "Mom, Jay didn't come home." Mrs. Harris moved quickly but calmly, the way only a mother holding back fear could. They called his friends. None of them had seen him since the last bell. No messages, no sightings, no explanations. At 10:30 they went to the police station. A tired-looking desk officer met them with a blank stare. Old as your brother? He asked flatly. 17, Andrea answered, gripping the counter so her hands wouldn't shake. He never stays out this late. The officer sighed like he'd heard it all before. He's probably blowing off steam. Boys his age do that. Mrs. Harris said firmly, her voice sharper now. He's not that kind of boy. He's never missed dinner without calling. Something's wrong. The officer shrugged, filling out a half-hearted report. We'll keep an eye out. Andrea's voice cracked. That's it? You're not going to look for him? The officer glanced up from his clipboard, annoyance flashing across his face. It's been a few hours. Not enough for a missing persons alert. Come back tomorrow if he doesn't show up. Mrs. Harris inhaled slowly, biting back the scream that burned in her throat. We don't have until tomorrow. But the officer had already turned away, shuffling paperwork like her son was just another number on a long list of problems too small to matter. Andrea stormed out first, tears stinging her eyes. Mrs. Harris followed, holding her purse close against her chest, as if it could shield her from the weight of the night. Outside, the streets were quiet, but the shadows felt heavier. Andrea turned to her mother, desperation crackling in her voice. Mom, they're not going to help us. They don't care. He filmed them. They know what he saw. What if they... Don't finish that sentence, her mother said, pulling her close. We're going to find him, I promise. But even as she said the words, Mrs. Harris felt the truth settling in her bones like cold rain. The kind of truth you can't pray away. The kind of truth that keeps you awake long after the lights go out. And somewhere in the dark, Maya Jennings' phone buzzed on her nightstand. One word. From Andrea. No. The call came at dawn. A static-laced dispatch crackled across the police scanner Maya kept running on her nightstand. 4. Possible 1087. Behind Sunfresh Laundry. Suspected gang homicide. Her chest tightened. Sunfresh Laundry sat 3 blocks from Roosevelt High. The alley behind it was where kids cut through after school, where Jalen always filmed his neighborhood footage. Maya threw on her jacket, heart pounding like war drums. By the time she arrived, yellow crime scene tape already cordoned off the alleyway. Patrol cars lined the street, their lights flashing cold and indifferent. Officers milled about, sipping coffee, cracking jokes like this was any other morning in small-town Georgia. She spotted Deputy Toiverer standing near the body, his arms crossed, face blank. McCrae flanked him, shifting uncomfortably. Maya pushed through the gathering crowd, her boots crunching on broken glass and gravel. An officer moved to block her path, but Toiver raised a hand. Let her through, he said, voice flat. The crowd parted, and Maya saw him. Jalen Harris, face down in the dirt, a single bullet hole in his back, his camera gone, his phone gone, just a boy lying cold under the morning sun. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She knelt beside him, her fingers brushing the sleeve of his jacket. It was still warm. She stood slowly, turning to Toiver, fire building behind her eyes. What happened? She demanded. Toiver's response was almost casual. Looks like gang violence. Probably a deal gone bad. Maya's voice dropped low and dangerous. What gangs? Toiver, this town doesn't have gangs. You know it, I know it, everyone here knows it. McCrae looked away. Toiver smiled, small and cruel. Things change when you're not looking. But Maya wasn't buying it. She scanned the alley. No shell casings. No signs of a struggle. No witnesses. Just the perfect narrative for a lazy sheriff and a corrupt department. She took a step closer, lowering her voice so only Toiver could hear. You killed him. Toiver didn't flinch. Careful, soldier. Accusations like that can get you in trouble. Maya clenched her fists, knuckles white. So can murder. He leaned in slightly, his breath sharp with coffee and arrogance. You're in way over your head, Jennings. Go home, before you end up in an alley just like this. She didn't blink. Airy live in the war you started. The coroner arrived, zipping Jalen's small body into a black bag. Maya watched the zipper close, her jaw tight enough to crack bone. Around her the crowd shifted, whispering. Wasn't that the Harris boy? Didn't he film something? Guess he shouldn't have been out after dark. The narrative was already spreading. Maya could feel it, crawling through the streets like poison. But in her mind, one truth burned brighter than all their lies. They silenced Jalen because he spoke the truth. And now, that truth belonged to her. Maya stood at the Harris front porch, her boots heavy with grief. Inside, the air felt still and thin, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Andrea opened the door, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen from crying all night. She didn't speak, just stepped aside to let Maya through. Mrs. Harris sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea. She hadn't touched. The silence was deafening. For a long moment, no one spoke. Maya lowered herself into the chair opposite her. She set her phone on the table between them, her voice barely a whisper. I found him. Mrs. Harris's face crumbled, years of strength collapsing in an instant. Her shoulders shook, but no tears came, just a hollow, shaking breath. She finally rasped, barely able to form the word. Maya swallowed hard, the words cutting her throat on the way out. Shot in the back, no witnesses. They're calling it gang violence. Mrs. Harris let out a sharp, bitter laugh. The sound was dry, cruel. Gang violence. In a town with no gangs. Andrea gripped her mother's hand tightly, tears slipping down her face. He didn't do anything wrong, Andrea whispered. He was a kid. He filmed what they did to you. That's all. Maya felt the weight of it crush her chest. She should have protected him. She should have seen it coming. But they were faster, colder, crueler than she expected. And now a family sat shattered before her because of it. She leaned forward, resting her forearms on the table. I promise you both, I will burn down everything they built. They will not bury this story. They will not bury him. Mrs. Harris looked up slowly, her eyes sharp despite her tears. Promise me something else, Maya. Don't let them turn you into them. Don't let your anger make you cruel. Maya nodded, the words anchoring her. I won't, she said softly, but I will make them answer for what they've done. That night, the whole town gathered for the vigil. Hundreds stood outside the community center, candles flickering in the summer breeze, signs lifted into the twilight sky. Some bore Jalen's name, others demanded justice. The whispers of the streets had turned into voices, angry, grieving, awake. Reverend Lisa Gordon stood at the steps, her tall frame backlit by the porch lights. She spoke without a microphone, but her voice carried through the crowd like thunder. They tried to silence one boy's truth. They thought his death would end this story, but Jalen's voice echoes through every one of us standing here tonight. Maya stood at the edge of the crowd, her hands in her jacket pockets, head bowed low. For the first time since returning home, she didn't feel alone. The people beside her were tired of fear, tired of silence. Reverend Gordon's voice rose one final time. Tonight, we light these candles. Tomorrow, we light the world. And Maya knew then, the war wasn't coming. It was already here. Long after the vigil candles burned down, Maya sat alone in her father's garage, the single overhead bulb casting harsh shadows across the cracked concrete floor. Dust drifted through the air, catching in the light like battlefield smoke. Around her, faded toolboxes and rusted lawn equipment lined the walls, but Maya wasn't looking for gardening tools. She was opening the pan. She pulled down the old army footlocker from the top shelf. The metal creaked as she set it on the workbench. The combination lock spun under her fingers. Her father's birthday, the code she never changed. Inside, beneath neatly folded fatigues and a framed photo of her Special Forces unit, lay the tools she never thought she'd use again. Encryption modules, surveillance scanners, secure satellite communicators, flash drives preloaded with bypass scripts, tactical blueprints, all of it still there waiting, like old friends ready to go back into battle. She worked methodically, her movements crisp and practiced. Every cable checked, every battery charged, every line of code scrubbed for digital fingerprints. She reassembled her surveillance gear with care, configuring the micro cameras and audio transmitters that would capture the truth. There would be no glitches this time, no lost footage, no plausible deniability. On the far wall, she pinned up a county map marked with deputy patrol routes and prison transfer points. Red string connected incidents, arrest records, court dates. Every line led back to two names, Sheriff Kennethon Danvers and Deputy Shane Toiver. They were the architects of this scheme, the ones profiting off stolen lives. But there was one more thread she needed to pull. Deputy Kyle McRae. The weak link, the man whose hands had trembled when she looked him in the eye at the crime scene. Maya knew that look. Guilt, fear, regret. It was the crack in their armor, and tonight she would drive a wedge through it. She packed a go-bag with essentials, gloves, zip ties, encrypted recorder, and her old Kabar knife, more for intimidation than use. Every item packed with precision, her body moving on instinct. As she closed the footlocker, her mother's voice echoed faintly in her mind. "Don't let your anger make you cruel." Maya paused, her hand resting on the lid. She wasn't here for revenge. She was here for justice. And justice required clarity, not rage. She slipped out the back door into the night, the humid Georgia air wrapping around her like a familiar enemy. The streets were quiet, but she knew better than to trust silence. She scanned the shadows, checked the angles, and headed for the old quarry on the edge of town, a place forgotten by most, perfect for a conversation no one else needed to hear. Tonight, the war changed hands, and McRae was about to learn that the hunter had become the hunted. The old quarry was silent, except for the faint hum of distant crickets. Moonlight stretched across the gravel like a spotlight on an empty stage. McRae's cruiser sat alone near the rusted gate, its headlights off, engine running low. He thought no one knew he was here, sneaking cigarettes before his midnight shift. Maya approached from the shadows, her steps light on the uneven ground. Years of stealth training guided her every move. She was already behind him when she spoke. "Smoking'll kill you faster than this town." McRae spun around, hand instinctively reaching for his weapon, but it wasn't there. Maya had already relieved him of it, holding the pistol low at her side. He froze, wide-eyed, chest heaving. "Maya," he whispered, voice trembling. I didn't." "Save it." Her voice was cold steel. "I'm not here to listen to excuses. I'm here for the truth." He backed up slightly, hitting the side of his cruiser. "I got nothing to say." Maya stepped closer, her shadow towering over him. "You had plenty to say when you were laughing with Toiver. When Jalen's body hit the ground, you laughed." His knees buckled slightly. "I didn't pull the trigger. That wasn't me." "No," she said sharply, "but you drove the car. You turned off the cameras. You erased his phone." McRae's voice cracked. "Danvers gave the orders. Toiver was just waiting for the chance. I couldn't stop it. If I said no, they'd bury me too." She pulled a small recorder from her jacket, setting it on the cruiser's hood. "Say it again, but this time for the world to hear." McRae's face paled. He shook his head violently. "They'll kill me. You don't understand. They own everything. The courts, the judges. Hell, half the town thinks Danvers is a hero." Maya stepped in, lowering her voice to a razor-thin whisper. "Then give them someone else to fear. Confess, Kyle. Tell the truth, before you end up like Jalen, alone in an alley while they call it gang violence." Tears welled in his eyes. He wiped them away with the back of his sleeve, broken and tired. "We had quotas, arrest numbers to meet. Danvers gets kickbacks for every inmate sent to Colonial Creek, double for veterans, triple if they're labeled unstable. And Jalen? McCrae swallowed hard. Toiver said we had to send a message. Scare anyone else from filming. Danvers signed off on it. They called it maintenance of order. Maya clicked the recorder off. The words hung heavy between them. She tossed his gun back, watching him fumble to catch it. Tomorrow, this goes public, she said. You have one night to decide. Cooperate with the FBI, or run and pray they don't find you first. McCrae crumpled against the cruiser, his shoulders shaking. As Maya walked away, her voice drifted back through the dark. Clock's ticking, deputy. By dawn, Maya was back at her cabin, the soft glow of her laptop screens lighting the dark. The audio file of McCrae's confession played over the speakers one last time. No edits, no filters, just raw fear and truth. She crafted the message carefully. Anonymous sender, no traceable IP, multiple VPN layers bouncing the upload through servers across Europe and South America. She sent it to every major news outlet, from the Atlanta Times to national networks. The subject line was simple: Deputy confesses, Sheriff's Department running profit scheme on black veterans. She hit send. Then she waited. It didn't take long. Her phone buzzed non-stop as alerts poured in. Twitter threads exploded with hashtags: Justice for Jalen, Riverside corruption, veterans betrayed. TikTok users sliced McCrae's tearful voice over protest footage. National anchors replayed the confession during the morning broadcasts, their faces frozen in shock. Sheriff Danvers' carefully built narrative of Maya as an unstable veteran crumbled in real time. Maya knew this was only the beginning. She turned to her war board. Lines connected arrest dates to transfer papers, bank records to private prison contracts. She added new faces: judges who'd signed off on inflated bail, prosecutors who pushed bogus charges, reporters who helped spin the truth. The corruption wasn't confined to the sheriff's department. It reached the courthouse, the jail, the boardrooms. She circled Danvers' name in red. This wasn't about revenge. This was about exposure. And if the system wouldn't hold itself accountable, she would burn it down in the public square. Doc's encrypted message popped up on the secure laptop. People watching. Public pressure's mounting. You've got one shot. Make it count. But she typed back quickly. Pull the files on Colonial Creek's shareholders. I bet they're in this too. Doc responded seconds later. Already ahead of you. County commissioner, state senator, even a judge, all getting payouts. Maya leaned back, the weight of it settling on her shoulders. This wasn't just about her, or Jalen. This was about an entire system that fed itself on injustice, and no one had dared fight back. Until now. She glanced at the clock. In 24 hours, she would take the fight public. No shadows, no backroom deals, just the truth, laid bare where everyone could see it. She gathered her gear, packing the flash drives, backup hard drives, and physical files. She double-checked her encryption protocols, ensured copies were safe in multiple locations. The final confrontation had to be undeniable, a spectacle so large, so clear, that even the most loyal supporters of Danvers couldn't spin it away. She pulled down the last pin on her war board, a photo of herself from her military days, a reminder of who she was before they tried to strip her identity away on the side of that dark road. And she whispered to herself the words her father once told her before her first deployment. Fight smart, fight loud, fight for those who can't. The first light of morning broke over the Georgia state capitol, casting long shadows across the marble steps. Maya stood at the base of the building, adjusting the collar of her full green beret uniform. The medals on her chest caught the dawn's rays, each one a silent testament to years of sacrifice the system had tried to erase. Around her, the streets buzzed with a quiet energy, as if the entire city was holding its breath. Vans from national media outlets lined the curb, their satellite dishes pointed skyward. Reporters milled about with steaming coffee cups and nervous expressions. They knew today wouldn't be another bland press conference. Something bigger was coming. Across the plaza, Reverend Gordon stood at the head of the crowd, a calm force in the early morning chaos. Her voice rang out over the crowd, steady and resolute, calling for peace but demanding accountability. Hundreds gathered at first, then thousands. Veterans in faded uniforms, teachers holding hand-painted signs, parents carrying children on their shoulders. They came from every corner of the state, their voices quiet but unyielding. Some held candles, remnants from Jalen's vigil. Others carried blown-up screenshots from McCrae's confession. The words, "Prophet over people," stenciled in bold beneath his tear-streaked face. Maya exhaled slowly, centering herself. Her father used to tell her that the quiet before a battle was where clarity lived. She felt it now. This wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about personal pain. This was about every black veteran forced into silence. Every family torn apart by corruption hiding behind a badge. She checked her phone. Doc's message flashed across the screen. The bodies are live. Backup servers in place. Cameras rolling. Time to light the match. She scanned the growing crowd. Familiar faces met her gaze. Maya Jennings, her mother, standing beside Mrs. Harris. Their grief and strength side by side. Andrea Harris lifted her brother's old camera high above her head, recording this moment the way Jalen once recorded the world. The Capitol steps, once symbols of untouchable power, now belong to the people. Maya climbed them slowly, the weight of the evidence drive heavy in her pocket. Each step was deliberate, every bootfall a silent declaration of defiance. When she reached the podium, the crowd hushed. Even the birds seemed to quiet in the trees overhead. She looked out over the sea of faces, some hopeful, some broken, all waiting. She took a breath, steady and sure, and spoke the words that carried the weight of everything she had lived through. "I am Master Sergeant Maya Jennings, United States Army, retired, and I will not be silent anymore." The screen behind her flickered to life, and the truth began to play. The massive screen towered over the crowd, its glow illuminating stunned faces as file after file filled the air with the cold truth. First came the memoirs, official documents stamped with Sheriff Danvers' signature, detailing quotas for arrests. Color-coded spreadsheets labeled high-value target, listed names and profiles of black veterans, with notations about disability benefits and combat training. Each highlighted row was a life hunted for profit. Gasp rippled through the crowd as the next file appeared. A contract between the Riverside County Sheriff's Department and Colonial Creek Correctional Facility. It detailed cash bonuses for every inmate held longer than 30 days, with double payments for veterans flagged as unstable. The words on the screen burned like fire. Retention bonus, $5,000, 0 cents per veteran exceeding 30-day hold period. And then came the body cam footage. The screen crackled with static before revealing Shane Toivera's sneering face. His voice filled the square. "Make sure you log this one. She's combat trade, high risk. That's double points for the books." Another clip showed McCrae's nervous laugh as he and Toiver forced Maya to kneel. The audio was crystal clear. "You people think you're special. Not tonight." A ripple of outrage swept through the crowd. People shook their heads, hands covering mouths, tears falling silently as they watched the violence laid bare. Then, the final blow. McCrae's full confession. The young deputy's voice cracked with guilt as he laid it all out. The arrests, the false charges, the prison kickbacks, Sheriff Danvers runs it all. We were ordered to provoke veterans, escalate charges, and fill the cells. Jalen Harris? He filmed it. They couldn't risk that getting out. Toiver pulled the trigger. Danvers gave the order. The crowd fell into stunned silence. Maya let the recording finish, then spoke, her voice steady but thick with grief. They murdered a child to protect their profit. A 17-year-old boy whose only crime was telling the truth. She paused, letting the weight of it settle over them. Used our service, our pain, our sacrifice, and turned it into a business plan. She scanned the crowd, seeing the fury rise behind tearful eyes. They said I was unstable, that I was dangerous, and maybe I am dangerous to them, because I remember my oath to protect this country from enemies foreign and domestic. The crowd erupted, voices crashing like thunder against the marble walls. Justice for Jalan. Shut it down. Arrest them all. News anchors scrambled to narrate the moment live. Social media exploded with clips of the confession, the contracts, and Maya standing tall in her uniform. Hashtags trended worldwide. Justice for Jalan. Riverside correction. Rain, reprise. Maya stepped back from the podium, her heart pounding, but her spirit clear. The people had seen. The truth was free. And there was no going back now. The roar of the crowd built like a wave, cresting against the cold stone of the Capitol. People surged forward, fists raised, voices united in a single cry for justice. Journalists streamed the chaos live as the chant thundered louder. Shut it down! Shut it down! Maya scanned the crowd from her place on the steps. She spotted teachers from the local school, standing shoulder to shoulder with veterans, construction workers, pastors, and small business owners. It wasn't just the victims anymore, it was the entire town. For the first time in years, they stood on the same side. And then came the sirens. Black SUVs rolled up to the square, their blue and red lights flashing silently. Doors opened in unison, and out stepped federal agents in crisp navy jackets, the golden letters FBI glowing against the morning sun. The crowd parted as they advanced, their movements sharp and sure. These weren't local deputies. These were agents who answered to no one in Riverside County. Sheriff Danvers' limousine screeched around the corner seconds later, his face pale as he exited the car. Reporters swarmed him, microphones shoved in his face. Sheriff Danvers, did you authorize the quotas? Are you receiving kickbacks from Colonial Creek? Did you order the death of Jalan Harris? Danvers stammered, sweat beading at his temples. He raised his hands, as if to calm the storm. These accusations are outrageous. We have always acted in the interests of public safety. But Maya saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. The lead FBI agent stepped forward, flanked by two deputies. Kenneth Danvers, you are under federal investigation for conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations. Please place your hands behind your back. The crowd held its breath. Danvers froze. His mouth opened, searching for words that could make this moment disappear, but none came. He turned as if to run. Too late. The agents grabbed his arms, cuffing him in front of the cameras. The sound of metal locking into place echoed through the square like a gavel striking wood. The crowd exploded again. Cheers, tears, applause. Strangers embraced. Veterans saluted. Children waved handmade signs reading, "Justice wins," and Jalan's light shines on. Danvers was led down the steps he once ruled from. The mighty man in the white hat, now just another criminal heading for a cell. Behind him, more agents spread out across the county, raiding the sheriff's department, seizing files, arresting officers. Reverend Gordon approached Maya, her voice trembling but proud. "You did it, child. You brought it all to light." Maya shook her head, watching the people celebrate below. "No, Reverend. They did it. All I did was start the spark." As the agents escorted Danvers away, his eyes locked onto Maya's, burning with hatred and fear. But it didn't matter. The people had risen, and power would never flow through his hands again. The sun was still rising when they came for Shane Toiver. Black SUVs lined his quiet street, federal agents moving with military precision. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, phones in hand, capturing the moment their neighborhood bully finally faced justice. Toiver stumbled onto his porch barefoot, a thin robe barely covering his frame. His hands trembled as agents surrounded him, reading his rights in clipped, professional tones. He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. The bravado he wore so proudly during traffic stops dissolved in the morning air. The agents placed him in handcuffs, the cold steel clicking around his wrists. A news crew caught it all live. The camera zoomed in on his face, swollen from sleep and fear, no longer the untouchable deputy who once laughed at Maya's pain. Across town, Deputy Roberts was pulled from the Blue Line bar, his favorite haunt. He tried to slip out the back, but federal agents met him at the alleyway. As they cuffed him against a dumpster stained with last night's beer and lies, he cursed under his breath, realizing the empire was crumbling faster than he could escape it. Sheriff Danvers was the last to fall. He made it as far as the county line, racing down a back road in his black SUV, but even he couldn't outrun the federal net. A roadblock of unmarked vehicles waited, engines idling, agents standing like sentinels beneath the towering pines. Danvers slammed on the brakes, dust swirling around him like smoke from a dying fire. For a moment, he just sat there, gripping the wheel, sweat pouring down his brow. Then, slowly, his shoulders sagged. He opened the door and stepped out with the arrogance of a man who still thought his power meant something. But as the agents approached, guns lowered but steady, Danvers finally realized the truth. He was alone. Completely alone. They cuffed him without ceremony, reading him a litany of charges: conspiracy, fraud, civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, and more. His badge, once a symbol of authority, clattered to the ground as they searched him. Reporters, live streamers, and stunned residents filmed every second. The sheriff, who ruled by fear, now stood silent, powerless, exposed. The crowd at the courthouse erupted when news of his arrest broke. People cheered, cried, and hugged strangers. Veterans saluted, mothers wept. For the first time in decades, Riverside County witnessed the fall of its most powerful men, not through violence, but through truth. And it was only the beginning. By noon, federal agents had seized control of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. The old brick building stood, surrounded by flashing lights and heavy boots. What once was the fortress of oppression now stood stripped of its power. Maya watched from across the street, arms crossed over her chest. She saw them carry out boxes filled with hard drives, arrest records, and financial ledgers. Evidence of years of corruption packed into brown cardboard, destined for a courtroom where lies wouldn't shield them anymore. The jail, too, fell quickly. Agents escorted stunned correctional officers from the gates, some still wearing their morning coffee stains, realizing too late that the whispers of injustice they ignored had now become thunder. Inside the cells, the air shifted. Veterans who had been silenced by false charges and inflated bail heard the news first. Some wept quietly on their bunks. Others stared at the peeling walls, unsure whether to believe freedom had truly come. One by one, federal officials reviewed their cases, calling out names. Men who had been treated like numbers now stood and walked out into the light, heads held high, shoulders squared, despite months of humiliation. Maya met them at the gate, greeting each with a nod of recognition. She saw the scars on their faces, the same ones she carried, and offered them something they hadn't had in months: respect. Reverend Gordon and Diane Jennings waited nearby with food, blankets, and quiet words of comfort. Volunteers handed out legal aid flyers, offering help to clear their records and rebuild their lives. A group of younger veterans approached Maya. Their faces were tired but determined. One spoke up, voice rough from months of silence. "Did we win, ma'am?" Maya shook her head gently. "Not yet, but we've started something they can't stop." The courthouse lawn became an impromptu assembly. Reporters conducted live interviews, families reunited in tearful embraces. Veterans shared their stories, finally heard after years of being dismissed as threats or liabilities. On a nearby building, a projector displayed Maya's warboard. The evidence of corruption, the faces of those arrested, and a growing list of officials under investigation. It wasn't just the sheriff's department. City council members, business owners, and a county judge were implicated too. The rot was deep, but the roots of resistance were deeper. As the sun lowered in the sky, federal officials issued a statement to the press. Effective immediately, Riverside County law enforcement was placed under federal oversight. A task force would oversee the retraining and rebuilding of the department. The empire Danvers built on fear had collapsed in a single day. And still, Maya knew the battle wasn't over. The system could heal, or it could hide its wounds until another Danvers rose from the ashes. It was up to them to make sure it healed. That night, the community gathered in the town square. No one called for it. No one sent invitations. People simply came. Candles flickered in the summer breeze. Children held signs painted in bright colors. Justice lives here. Veterans are our heroes. And Jalin, we remember. Maya stood beside Reverend Gordon as the first hymn filled the square. No speeches this time, just voices, raw and unpolished, but full of hope. Across the square, Maya Jennings handed out cornbread and sweet tea, just like her husband used to during town hall meetings years ago. Some families wept quietly, others laughed softly, remembering what it felt like to smile in public without fear. The veterans who had been freed that morning stood together, a loose circle of solidarity. Their faces were weathered, their hands scarred, but their backs were straight. They spoke in low voices about what came next, how they would support each other, how they would rebuild, and how they would protect the next generation from ever enduring what they had. Reverend Gordon placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. "This town isn't the same one you left," she said softly. "It may not be perfect, but it's awake now." Maya nodded, her gaze sweeping across the crowd, awake and watching. Nearby, a young girl who reminded Maya of herself at 12 years old stood beside her father, holding a worn-out camcorder. The girl smiled shyly at Maya, raising the camera in a small salute. Hope, Maya realized, was contagious. As the evening deepened, people began sharing their own stories, quiet confessions of stops that never made the news, of jobs lost to rumors, of lives interrupted by fear. But there was strength in their voices now, strength born from finally being seen. Maya slipped away from the crowd after the candles burned low. She walked the quiet streets alone, passing the shuttered storefronts and broken sidewalks of her childhood. She paused outside the old barber shop where her father used to get his hair cut every other Saturday. The neon sign was gone, replaced by boarded windows, but she could almost hear his laughter through the night air. A stray breeze rustled the flag outside the courthouse. For years it had flown over a building where power was abused, but tonight it flew over a place reclaimed by truth. Maya exhaled, her shoulders finally easing. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time in a long time, the silence of her hometown didn't feel oppressive. It felt peaceful. And in that fragile peace, something new had taken root. Not fear, but the quiet, stubborn seed of change. The abandoned military training facility sat on the edge of town like a forgotten relic, its gates rusted, its walls weathered by decades of storms. Where soldiers once prepared for distant wars, weeds now crept across empty courtyards and broken obstacle courses. But to Maya Jennings, it was perfect. She stood at the entrance, key in hand, the morning sun casting long shadows over the cracked pavement. This was where her next mission would begin. Not on foreign soil, not in secret, but right here in the community that raised her and nearly broke her. With the help of Doc and a handful of veterans she trusted, Maya purchased the property. The deal was quiet, paid for with donations from supporters across the country who had seen the video heard her story, and believed in the cause. The paperwork was clean. The intentions were anything but ordinary. Maya walked through the empty barracks, her boots echoing in the hollow rooms. She could almost hear the drill sergeants barking orders from decades ago. But the voices in her mind now were different. They belonged to Jalen Harris, to the veterans wrongfully imprisoned, to every person who had been silenced by fear. Room by room, they got to work. Walls were patched, windows replaced, classrooms reimagined. What was once a place for combat training would now be a sanctuary of defense, not against foreign enemies, but against injustice at home. One wing became the Legal Rights Hub, where people would learn how to document police encounters, file public records requests, and protect themselves in court. Another wing became the Surveillance Resistance Center, where they would teach encryption, data protection, and the tactics to stay ahead of unlawful tracking. The old gymnasium was cleared out to become the self-defense training floor. Here, Maya envisioned grandmothers learning wrist locks alongside teenagers, practicing situational awareness drills. The walls would echo not with war cries, but with empowerment. She enlisted old friends from her Special Forces days to lead workshops. Cybersecurity experts flew in from Atlanta. Civil rights attorneys donated their time on weekends. Even Reverend Gordon offered to teach community organizing classes. Her sermons now adapted into lessons on grassroots leadership. Maya spent her days in sweat and dust, helping paint the walls, install security cameras, and clear brush from the perimeter. But at night, she sat in the quiet command room she built from an old storage closet, mapping out the long game. This wasn't a one-time victory. It was a battle plan for the next generation. She pinned a map of Riverside County on the wall, dotted with markers of every place a wrongful stop had occurred. By the end of the first week, the pins had multiplied, but so had the names of people ready to fight back. And somewhere deep inside, in the place soldiers keep their quiet hope, Maya felt something stir. They were building more than a defense center. They were building a movement. The first training session filled the gymnasium to capacity. Rows of folding chairs stretched from one end of the old gym to the other, filled with faces Maya never thought she'd see together. Veterans with weathered hands and steady eyes sat beside teenagers with fresh notebooks and restless energy. Grandmothers in floral blouses sat next to single moms in work boots. The room buzzed with nervous excitement. People from every corner of the county, drawn together by one simple truth: they were tired of being afraid. Maya stepped forward in her full Green Beret uniform, not to intimidate, but to inspire. She began with the basics: how to document a police stop, what to say when pulled over, how to assert your rights without escalating the situation. She demonstrated calm, clear commands, her voice steady. "Officer, am I being detained, or am I free to go?" she said it once, twice, encouraging the room to say it with her. By the third time, their voices rang loud and confident. Doc led a cybersecurity workshop in the next room, showing kids how to encrypt their phones and upload videos instantly to cloud storage. "If it's online, it lives forever," he said. "That's how we keep them honest." In another wing, an army buddy named Jackson, built like a linebacker but soft-spoken, taught self-defense. The focus wasn't on violence, it was on escape, on survival, on making it home to your family. Week after week, the classes grew. What began as a single Saturday session expanded to weekday evenings. People came after work, after school, some bringing their kids because they had nowhere else to leave them. The center adapted, creating a kids' space, with books and games so no one had to miss training. Maya watched them grow stronger, watched shy high schoolers become confident public speakers, watched veterans rediscover their purpose, watched mothers teach their children how to film safely from the sidewalk without fear. They practiced mock traffic stops in the parking lot. They rehearsed filing complaints and following up with elected officials. They built a surveillance watch network, using neighborhood apps to track suspicious patrols and warn each other before they could be targeted. And when the county tried to pass a new ordinance restricting public filming of police, the students showed up at the town hall, prepared, united, and loud. The ordinance failed within hours. Maya stood in the back of that meeting, arms crossed, pride swelling in her chest. This was what they fought for. Not just to end one sheriff's reign of terror, but to teach people how to protect themselves when no one else would. The training center wasn't a school. It was a fortress of knowledge. And as long as its doors stayed open, no badge or title could ever silence them again. At the heart of the training center, beneath the newly installed skylight, stood a memorial unlike any other. A single, smooth stone, engraved with the words, Jalen Harris, 200-82025. He showed us the way. Around it, wildflowers grew in careful rows, sunflowers, daisies, and magnolias planted by his mother and sister. Every morning, before the classes began, Maya paused here. She placed her hand on the stone and remembered why they fought. Not for revenge, not for glory, but so no one else would be lost to silence. Jalen's story became the rallying cry for the entire movement. His face was painted on murals downtown, smiling as he held his phone high, a symbol of witness and courage. Shirts, stickers, and posters carried his name, reminding everyone who passed through those gates that the price of truth was high, but necessary. And outside the center's walls, change was beginning to take root. The new interim sheriff, appointed by the state, enacted sweeping reforms. Dashcam and bodycam footage were made public by default. Racial profiling training became mandatory. Transparency reports were issued monthly. But Maya wasn't content with symbolic victories. She kept the pressure on. She fought lawsuits, demanding the release of wrongfully imprisoned veterans. She lobbied the state capitol for stricter oversight of private prison contracts. And when officers tried to intimidate her students out city limits, she called them out on live stream, exposing their tactics in real time. The victories were small but undeniable. Deputies who once stopped cars without cause now paused, aware that eyes were everywhere. Officers who once mocked the rights of civilians now quoted those rights during traffic stops, fearful of being caught in another viral moment. Maya watched from a distance as the town slowly reclaimed its streets. Kids played outside past sunset. Parents walked without scanning for squad cars. People began to live again, cautiously, but freely. One afternoon, a teenage girl approached Maya after class. She wore a battered camera around her neck and a patch on her jacket that read Jalen's voice. "Ms. Jennings," she said, "do you think we'll ever stop fighting?" Maya knelt beside her, looking into the girl's determined eyes. "I hope so. But until that day comes, we fight smart, and we fight together." As the sun dipped below the tree line, casting golden light across the training grounds, Maya realized that the war she'd been fighting since the day she returned home wasn't just about Riverside County. It was about every place where silence had been mistaken for peace. And as long as there were people willing to stand, to speak, and to protect the powerless, there was still hope. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned, and this time it was on their terms. The morning was still when Maya Jennings walked through the dew-soaked grass of Pine Hill Cemetery. The sun filtered softly through the oaks, their branches stretched wide like old soldiers standing watch. She stopped at the familiar headstone, its simple engraving clear against the granite. Walter Jennings, husband, father, soldier of principle. Maya knelt, fingers brushing across her father's name. The wind carried the faint scent of magnolias from the hill behind her, the same trees he used to point out on their Sunday walks. For a moment, the world fell quiet, and the weight of what she had built, and what it had cost, settled on her chest. "Daddy, it's done," she whispered. "The fight you warned me about, the one you carried your whole life, we brought it into the light." She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. It cost more than I expected. It always does. But this town won't kneel anymore." Maya sat back on the bench they'd placed beside his grave, the one her mother visited every week. She thought of the students training back at the facility. Teenagers learning to hold a camera steady under pressure, veterans finding purpose in teaching again, mothers learning how to protect their children from wrongful arrests. She thought of Jalen Harris, whose memory now lived not just in tears, but in action. Her fingers traced the small emblem of her green beret pinned to her jacket. It no longer represented just her service overseas. It represented the battle she fought here, in the place she once called home, but no longer recognized. She knew there would be new battles, new threats. The system was bigger than one county, one sheriff, or one corrupt deal. But for the first time, Maya believed the people were ready, not waiting for heroes, becoming their own. The wind shifted, rustling the yellowed program from her father's funeral, still tucked beside the headstone. Maya smiled faintly. He'd hated injustice as much as she did, hated the way the world bent the rules for power and privilege. "Rest easy, Daddy," she said, rising. "We've got it from here." As she walked back down the hill, her boots silent against the soft earth, Maya felt the quiet peace that comes after battle. Not the absence of struggle, but the understanding you fought with everything you had and still stood tall. At the cemetery gate, she paused, looking back one last time. The sun broke fully over the treetops, casting warm light across the stones. For the first time in years, the world didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like home. Back in town, the streets looked the same, but the people walked taller. Storefronts opened earlier, and neighbors greeted each other with cautious optimism. But underneath the surface, something had shifted. They no longer lived waiting for injustice. Now they watched for it. At the corner of Roosevelt and Main, Mrs. Thompson, a retired schoolteacher who once feared leaving her house after dark, sat in a folding chair, a dash cam mounted on the light post above her. She waved to passing cars, notebook in hand, recording license plates of any unmarked cruisers parked for too long. Teenagers who once huddled in fear of being stopped now ran neighborhood patrols. They weren't vigilantes, they were witnesses. Equipped with smartphones and encrypted live streams, they followed the patrol patterns of deputies, documenting every unnecessary stop, every shadowy figure who thought no one was watching. Doc's surveillance app became a quiet revolution. It pinged every user when an officer's body cam went offline. In the first month, it pinged often. By the second, the ping rate dropped. Officers had learned, in Riverside, every citizen was a camera, every street a courtroom. Maya walked the neighborhood some evenings, her hood pulled low, watching how people held themselves now, no longer shrinking away from squad cars, no longer crossing the street to avoid confrontation. They stood their ground, not with fists, but with fact. The sheriff's department, now under state oversight, struggled to adapt. Arrest rates plummeted. Traffic stops that once targeted black veterans fell to almost zero. The quotas Danvers had built his empire on, gone. In their place, a new sheriff's team, stripped of its old culture, tried to rebuild trust brick by painful brick. But Maya knew trust wasn't given. It was earned. And so the training continued. Weekly rights workshops filled the community center. Self-defense classes ran on Saturdays. Neighborhood watch schedules hung in grocery stores and barber shops. Signed up for like church potlucks. Everyone had a role now. One afternoon, a boy no older than Jalen stopped Maya outside the pharmacy. He held up his phone, live streaming as they spoke. "Ms. Jennings," he said, his voice shaking but determined, "if they try to shut this down, if they try to stop us from filming, what do we do?" Maya smiled softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You keep filming," she said. "You keep standing, and you remind them of one thing." The boy's eyes widened. "What's that?" Maya's voice didn't waver. "That we don't kneel anymore." And in that moment, Beneath the late afternoon sun, Maya saw what real change looked like. Not in headlines or handcuffs, but in a child's steady hand holding the truth up to the world. Months later, headlines flashed across national news outlets. A federal crackdown on private prison kickbacks sparks national reform. Green Berets' battle against corruption inspires statewide changes. Grassroots surveillance movement spreads across rural America. Maya watched the coverage from the training center's break room, coffee in hand, but she didn't smile for the cameras. She smiled for the people filling the gym next door. Veterans, teachers, nurses, students, arming themselves with truth. Across the country, other towns began building their own centers. Some used old schools, others converted abandoned malls. They called them justice hubs, freedom academies, and the People's Watch. The names didn't matter. The mission did. Maya's inbox overflowed with speaking invitations, interviews, podcasts asking her to be the face of this movement, but she declined them all. The movement wasn't about her, it was about them. It was about Jalen Harris, who never lived long enough to see what his courage ignited, about Maya Jennings, who still made too much fried chicken for dinner, waiting for her daughter to come home safe, about every family who could now sleep without fear of flashing red and blue lights outside their window. One crisp Saturday morning, Maya stood at the front of the training yard as a new class of students gathered. The morning sun warmed the faces of young and old alike. Kesha, the teenage girl who once hid from police, now led the morning roll call. "Class, what do we say when fear comes knocking?" Kesha called out. The answer rang out, loud and unshakable, from dozens of voices. "We don't kneel anymore, we rise." Maya stood still for a moment, letting the words echo across the grounds. This wasn't a slogan, this was a promise. She walked through the facility slowly, taking in what they'd built. In the surveillance lab, students monitored police scanners and dash cams, alert to every shift on the streets. In the legal clinic, families filed civil rights complaints, no longer helpless against the system. In the gym, mothers practiced defensive holds while their children played nearby, their laughter filling the air. No one person could dismantle the entire system, but they could break it in pieces, expose its rot, force it to rebuild better. And, standing there, Maya knew something else. Her mission wasn't done. The battle lines had moved, but the fight remained. Still, for the first time since that night on the gravel road, with a gun pressed against her temple, she allowed herself a small peace. She had turned pain into purpose. And tomorrow they would rise again,